Going to be a big day on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers debating immigration policy and funding for Ukraine. 25 Washington correspondent Joe St. George, they're live now outside the Capitol building. The House holding a field hearing in Arizona today, George, and is this going to actually have an impact on immigration policy?
Yeah, hearing happening later this week in Yuma, Arizona, and it's a big deal because any time that a committee gathers, members of Congress gather on the border, it's obviously going to bring attention to this issue. However, we've learned through our reporting that don't expect Democrats to be there, and that is because they're calling this a political stunt, that this doesn't need to actually take place at the border, that conservatives are unnecessarily doing this. But again, this shows the schism between Democrats and Republicans on this issue. Certainly our viewers have been following this in Texas. It's a big issue in the Lone Star State. Conservatives believe that by holding hearings like this at the border, that they're able to perhaps bring more attention to this issue and continue to push for new policy changes to happen. Here's the reality, though. Most committee hearings that take place here on Capitol Hill or if they're at the southern border, they don't actually result in a law being passed. Oftentimes, they are simply just an opportunity to hear testimony and get a status report. I do think the more pressing issue impacting the border will happen next week at the Supreme Court. Justices will hear a case about ending Title 42, which our viewers are now familiar with. The Biden administration's been trying to wind down that policy. In their latest court documents, they say that the national emergency, the national public health emergency associated with COVID-19, that is ending in early May. Title 42 is connected to the pandemic, so that should end as well. If we see Title 42 end in the coming months, that will likely, when you speak to immigration experts, result in another spike at the southern border. So a lot of issues involving border and immigration, and we'll be keeping track of it over the coming days and weeks.
All right, Joe, and we're coming up on a year now since the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Vladimir Putin blasting the West overnight, doubling down on his country's actions. And U.S. has been sending aid to Ukraine, but could that change soon? And how much has been spent so far?
Yeah, overnight, President Putin essentially responding to President Biden's visit to Ukraine yesterday. President Putin blaming the West for this war. Of course, when you speak to the White House, they say President Putin is to blame for this war. President Putin and Russia also announcing that they're withdrawing from a key nuclear arms treaty that helped reduce the proliferation of nuclear weapons overnight. So relations between Russia and the United States are extremely tense. That's not necessarily breaking news, but you asked specifically about funding. There is growing tension here on Capitol Hill and around the country regarding the amount of money lawmakers have spent on this war as we mark the one-year mark. $100 billion plus have been spent on this Ukraine war. And there are a number of conservatives in Texas, elsewhere around the country, who are saying maybe we should rethink that. Maybe we shouldn't be giving a blank check to Eastern Europe. So definitely Ukraine has received a lot of money in this past year, but I think it's unclear how much more they will receive in the coming year.
All right, a lot to follow there, Joe. And congrats on the baby news, by the way.
Thank you very much. Viewers, I'm becoming a father for the first time, so please send your advice.
We're happy for you, Joe. Thank you for that, and we'll see you next time. In the meantime, let's get over to Matthew Hidalgo.